I want to talk about something important when it comes to hunting. You talk about that this channel, what I do for a living was built on a base of hunting. Talk about that, whatever I've done in life and when it comes to career or anything, it's all revolved around, can I get time off of work? Can I go hunting and balance that with family and all the actual true priorities of life? And hunting strategy is so critical to me. And Dylan pointed out that we were talking about this video, how back in the day when we all started out, man, to be on a field edge and see 30 deer come out into a ag field or out in an open field was really, really cool. We'd see all those deer, it was fun. Really drew you to that afternoon, evening sit. I can remember, and we learned, back in the day, it was early 90s, mid 90s, I'd have someone drop me off in a pickup so I could step from the tailgate onto a fence row, climb up into the fence row. I remember shooting a young buck at that time and watching him die 200 yards out in the field. It was an alfalfa field, but that's how you had to get in and out, or we weren't gonna get in and out without spooking deer. And the more you rely on an evening setup like that, the more your hunting season set up for failure. And so I want to talk about kind of these steps and progression of typical evening setup, and we'll move back into a very secure morning setup, talk about those differences. And really it revolves around food. So we have a major food source about 250 yards from here that we call Gold Rush. It's about a 2-acre food plot. It's attached to a 1/4 acre extension with a 1/3 acre hunting plot in the end. It's a big food system for the area. It's a holding plot, meaning we want to hold deer there every day of the season until dark and then set them off to the ag fields or wherever in this neighborhood. Now, if you're on public land, that might be a giant oak flat that you're looking at. It might be a giant clear cut where you have this giant food source that actually draws deer every single day, and hopefully no one spooks it out. And you can rely on, like in the case of a young, fresh clear cut on public land, drawing deer every day of the season. And that's kind of like your ag field, that's your cornfield. Now this right here is almost like the little apple orchard off to the side on public land. Old home site that has some shrubs, bushes planted around it. It's overgrown and it's a diversity of habitat, and deer keep coming in. But bottom line is, this is what we would refer to as a larger size hunting food plot. This is a hunting food plot. We have a blind that's hidden right up here. We're actually gonna swap that out for a tree stand this year because I have a better spot for that blind. We wanna get more use out of it, and we'll stick a tree stand right in that red cedar right in front of it. We'll be able to cover this whole blind. What I like about this food plot is there's movement across side to side. Big food plot that way, water hole, bedding area, small harvest plot that way, and we'll go through there. But this is what I would consider an evening hunting spot because it's a big enough food source. When we come in here in the morning, we don't know if deer are here, we're gonna spook them out. And once you spook them out, the entire movement dries up within a day, very quickly. So if you rely on this for an evening spot, boy, yeah, this is a dream that field, it's a field that dreams are made of. But we sit here the first time, the second time, third time, spook a few deer, and within a week it's dried up. If you rely on that, you're doomed for failure before the season even begins. But we can manage this. I could hunt this spot every week and a half, 2 weeks, when the conditions are perfect. Get in here, we have perfect screening. We have switchgrass growing on the outside. It's a pass through, so if we have deer down in that corner, they don't even know we're getting to a stand right here. This food plot is long and narrow, so they're just moving through. They're not here that long. They're going to these bigger food sources. We have the complement of a bigger food source nearby that we don't hunt right on the edge of with a bow. With a bow, it's a straight shot right across this field, all bow range. As they're traveling by, we have a mock scrape right over there. So really cool spot to set up for an evening. This is that area where it's on the way to a big oak flat, maybe the edge of an oak flat on public land, edge of clear cut, that swamp edge where there's a lot of diversity. This is that spot where you can't overhunt, but it sets the table for movement and defined movement every single afternoon. So let's go from here, let's go to another spot, and you'll keep seeing this pattern progress as we move back here. It's what I would call a decent afternoon, evening spot, but again, you can't overhunt it. If you do, you destroy the whole movement. Both sides just creates a giant hole. The deer won't move through here. So let's take a look at the next spot, and we'll talk about why that's an even better little pass-through hunting plot, what makes it more secure, and then we'll go through here with a couple other spots just to try to show you the differences of what you might expect when you're out scouting on public land or where you're setting up your own property design on your own land. Now this is more my idea of a spot to hunt, and that's kind of why we're moving Jack's tower stand back at that last one. It's a really cool blind. And I like sitting in it. It blends in well the way we have it set up. So this food plot's a little bit smaller. This is more of a 1/4 acre. The other one's more like 2/3 of an acre, even 3/4 of an acre in size. So quite a bit smaller and a lot more intimate. And that means a buck coming through an open field like this is going to be a lot more comfortable. It also means larger food source, more deer when you come in the morning, or the more deer that you have the potential of spooking. So when we come into a spot like this, we don't expect a lot of deer to be here, but there is that chance because it's a food source. So while we might use this for an occasional morning sit, the last one we wouldn't use for a morning sit. This one we pretty much have to rely on evening. Occasional morning, meaning I might hit this once every 3 or 4 weeks, if that, depending on what kind of signs in the area, scrapes and rubs. And think about that, we're still closer to that larger food source we were just at. It's only about 100 yards away. So there is that opportunity to come in here and spook a deer. We're also still next to the ag field out here. Don't almost be like coming to a little bit smaller, like an apple tree instead of an orchard, and it's next to a big clear cut still. So you have that opportunity. It's a little bit more intimate. Small single food source. That's kind of how you look at it. Deer still passing through. We have great access, great switchgrass on the outside edge, plus natural habitat edge here too that holds, even we've had grouse in here, pheasant, rabbit. It's really thick on this outside edge. So it gives us that ability to get in and out, but there's still that potential. And this is what I would call just a next step down as far as risk in the afternoon, evening, where we could probably get more sits out of this and not spook deer because it's a smaller food source. But again, if we're relying on this one right here, this food plot, this setup, and that one over there for our afternoon, evening hunts or our hunting in general, then we're really setting ourselves up for failure, because undoubtedly, because of the food that's here and the risk associated that with deer, the fact that they're wary coming into these food sources, the fact that a buck likely won't go out into a giant open field as often during daylight as he would something smaller and on food, then we have that potential of spooking deer even here, especially if we rely on this in the last stand hunting over and over again. So really, that's where I'm looking at. Try to recognize that when you're on public land. This is more of a bigger food source. I can get away with it a little bit. It's anchoring the movement, but I still want to find these other spots off to the side. And let's go into another one that's even a safer spot, and we'll talk about the conditions for that. And I'm hoping it helps you get away from your reliance on hunting in the evenings this fall. Now this is an example of a lot more secure site. We are off food, but we're not quite on the bedding area yet. Kind of that in between. It'd be like if you had a clear cut and another clear cut, and then you're hunting a bench in between, or a swamp edge, or the edge of a hardwood transition line to where there's a cut line. Natural movement of topography, saddles, benches, if you're familiar with real good hill country. But you like that kind of set up in between bedding areas and in between big food sources. The nice thing about a clear cut on public land is it represents typically a lot of bedding for does, and then also a good food source too. So you're in between those. We have a bedding area about 150 yards over there. We had a water hole there. We turned it into a bedding area. Finally had the time to do that and resources. And then we moved the water hole out to here. So it's about 150 yards from where our stand used to be. What that gives us is a great morning and evening spot. It's a spot that we could hit in the morning after we hit one of those spots in the evening the night before. This spot right here is approximately 150 yards to 200 yards from the last spot. And then that spot's about 150 yards from the spot before. So we have a stand. We don't have to come in here very far. You can see the big giant bank of switchgrass we have out here. And as we get closer to the corner of this field, the less ag there is. So this is an area where we can expect to get into without spooking deer, because it's in the corner. We don't have planted ag right in the corner. It's all switchgrass. Stand location will be right here. We actually have family traditions ladder stand just sitting here waiting. These things are awesome. So we'll stick that in that tree right there. And then we have our water hole set up right down here. What's nice about a water hole, unlike a food plot where even a small food plot a deer might be at for a half hour or 20 minutes, even a small one. Water hole, they're usually in here for 1 or 2 minutes. We put a camera on almost all our water holes. All our water holes have cameras on eventually. We have a reveal right back there. These deer are coming in here for a minute or two and they move on. It's just simple pass through. So even though it's not on a bedding area, it's not on a food source, but just by the nature of a water hole, a lot more likely that when we come in here, we're not going to spook deer, because it's just a one stop, very quick shot and on the way through. So very secure access. We can get in and out of here. It's between bedding and food movements. So this is the type of stand where we could even sit all day. If I think there's a big buck around this area this year, we're putting a nice comfortable ladder stand there where we can sit all day. You can see it goes uphill from here. So it's going to appear like that ladder stands about 25 feet up in the air. We'll have to really aim low when we make a shot down here, but we're still only 22, 23 yards away. And we'll have this set up really well when it comes fall, and actually within the next few weeks. And this is a great spot. You know, we're really looking forward to hunting this And this is helping us getting away from a reliance on evening hunts because it's a beautiful morning spot, beautiful evening spot. What that typically means though is that an afternoon evening spot doesn't rely on a bedding area. What I mean by that is if you have a great morning bedding area stand and deer coming back to that morning area bedding stand and you're sitting there with your wind blowing in the opposite direction of where they're coming from and it's not blowing into the bedding area, then those deer are going to leave in the afternoon to go back to food source movement. So a great evening source stand that we've looked at a couple that are more pure evening, they're there because of food. We can get in there in the afternoon because they're not there. On the flip side, the opposite of that is a morning area stand where the closer to dark it becomes, deer are moving towards the food source, but in the bedding area, they're moving away from. So the closer to the dark it gets, the more a bedding area stand becomes dull and a bad spot to sit in the afternoon. Plus, you can't get in there because you don't know where the deer are at. If you've been sitting there in the morning, you know when you can get out because you can see the deer around you. You've been there for 3 hours, 4 hours. So that's what makes the difference. But this water hole setup, the last thing I want to do, and I talk about this all the time, it's a big sin to put this water hole on food. Not only is a separation of quality stand locations very important to say, okay, this is more morning, this is more evening, but also this is very low risk to a mature buck. He just stops by here, gets a drink, and moves on. On the flip side, when he goes to that food source, that's high risk. Every time a deer goes to a major food source, ag field, food plot, whatever it might be, that's their highest risk movement of the day. When I add this water hole to that food source, I lower the value and increase the risk level of the water hole use, and I'm combining attractions and stand locations. Very bad strategy standpoint and property makeup standpoint and design strategy makeup to actually complete. So completely separate, gives us more of a morning / evening stand, all day stand. We looked at a couple, you know, the little food source we were at, that's more, that could be a morning stand, but the risk is a lot higher. And of course, first one we went to, I wouldn't want to sit in the morning. Too big of a food source, next to big food, next to big ag, and a chance of spooking out. So let's move to what a pure morning stand looks like and why. And you'll start to understand why you have to have this assemblage of stands. They typically relate to each other. This is just one area of our property, but we have a lot of combinations and complementary stands, I call them, where if you have a buck moving at this one, he's probably going to move at the 2 spots on either side too, maybe even the 3rd spot. And so this is a complementary stand. You have these section of stands. We have different winds we can use these for, morning, evening, different access routes from one side or the other, or across the field in the middle of the day or late morning we can get out. So let's go look at this morning stand, and I hope it's coming all together for you, how you can lower your reliance on evening stands this fall for ultimately a better hunt, because bucks move about 3 times longer during the morning hours during shooting light than they do afternoon hours. So that's one big part of it. The bottom line is you need that diversity of stands so you can become a better hunter and you're not spoiling your property within a week or 2 of the season beginning. Now this is more just a typical morning stand. We'd have a really hard time getting back here in the afternoon because we've had cuttings on this side of the trail, cuttings on this side. Stand is still about 70 yards back, and we're already in the woods 30 yards too, and we went through the corner of our switchgrass. So this is an area where it's interesting. The more morning it is, the more we're getting back in the timber. The closer to a pure evening, the closer it is to the field edge. And this is a stand that's so critical because then we're looking at, yeah, I have these great evening sits, but where can I come in and hunt a nice morning stand to take the pressure off the evening sets and have likely a better look at a mature buck anyways. Like I said before, you know, someone made a comment about morning versus evening hunting, hunt whatever you enjoy. And I'm all for that. But if you actually want to up your game and you actually want to shoot your target buck in the area, you want to expose yourself to a higher potential of target mature buck movement, whatever mature buck, it's all relative, 2-year-old or 5-year-old in your area, whatever it is, then you're going to want to hunt mornings. And it'll give you 3 times more opportunity to actually see a mature buck on its feet during the morning. The bottom line is pure morning, because we can't get in and out of here without spooking deer. I'm sure we spooked deer here. We left a big opening in our cuttings right here so they could go back and forth. You see our cuttings, hinge cuts, complete cuts of aspen up here. Got rid of the water hole, and we'll have a stand location right up here in this tree. What's really nice about this is a point. So when we come out here on this point, We have the wind blowing that way off the point, downhill behind us. The deer have no clue that we're in here. We could literally smell like a pig. It's just getting back here. So you come back in here early, blow our scent off this steep face, and then we don't have to worry about the wind till 2, 3 in the afternoon when it starts to swirl around and settle. But rest assured, if it's blowing back this way, we're safe. This is a pure morning stand. It helps us start to dream of some of those frosty, toe-numbing mornings where you can say, you know what, we're gonna come in here, we expect to see a buck. And we'll expect to see a buck. We have a reveal on the tree right here. We'll put a mock scrape hanging down from the branch right up here. So we'll have a good indication of what's in this area. We already have deer moving back and forth and bucks, so we see that on the camera right here. We'll have the tree right here in this nice straight oak, right up, and we'll have the stand right up there. So this is close quarters, but the deer don't expect you to be back here. Often in a bedding area, it's so different than a evening food source stand because the deer are coming into the food source looking for risk. They're looking for the potential of you being there. Back in their bedding area, they have no clue. So we get away with a lot more movement, being close shots. Dylan's right on the trail himself right now. So that deer moves right through here. He's not looking towards the stand. They're not used to even be here. It's not a food source area, so there's no risk. So that's what having these different stand locations does for you. This is all the way back into the bedding area, big bedding area on both sides, all the way down either side. We have that water hole stand about 150 yards that way. We can get in and out without spooking the deer here. There's hardly any cover in that location. It's a thin strip, just a cruising bench. Then we have a small food plot and then a medium-sized food plot that both can represent hunting plots, both more evening related, one all day, and then we have our morning stand back here. And that's what I'd want to see for you, whether you're hunting public land and you have to say, okay, this is my tree, and you have one stand location, you're going back and you say, okay, I can hunt this stand, this stand, this stand. Figure out your best approach for each one. Say, this is a big food source. That buck I'm after is probably bedding over here because it's a spot away from people the most. It's got the most diversity. You know, we're from major food sources here, at least our food plots and our food sources. We're about, from major food sources, 400 yards, 300 to 400 yards, 500 yards in that range. About 500 yards down here, there's another major food source. So we're right back in that wheelhouse where we expect bucks to be. On remote public land, that might be more like a half mile, 3/4 mile, where you find a major food source here, look about a half mile, 3/4 mile away. But what that does for you is it gives you a morning stand, gives you dedicated evening stands. It helps you assign stands in between that could be either morning or evening, maybe an all-day sit stand. And you can see, you know, we defined right here one all-day sit stand out of 4 stand locations, and typically I run about 15%, 20% could be all-day stands because they feature that perfect X of movement. They're not back here in the bedding because, again, the whole afternoon deer are leaving this to go towards food, and it's not at food because if we go in there in the morning we spook deer, we're just waiting for that last hour or two of light. So you find if you're sitting all day in a stand and it's not featuring this X of movement in between bedding and feeding, then you're wasting half the day, meaning you have a very low probability. I'm not saying sitting in a stand and enjoying the weather. We could sit in a stand today and enjoy the day. Wouldn't be necessarily a waste of day, but it would be if you want to actually shoot big bucks and you want to manage morning stands, evening stands, and a combination of stands to lower your risk and not rely on evening setups. It's so tempting to go into a big food source, sit in the evening, wait for those deer to come to you. But I'm telling you, you got to have these stands that are more morning, all day related so that you can maximize your sits. Hey, my sits, I can hunt just about any time I want, but I can't hunt the number of days just to waste days. I have to be very smart about when I hunt because I have a lot going on, whether the seed company business, personal family life, kids, enjoying friends, and oh, by the way, fitting a whole lot of work in, filming, doing all other kinds of stuff. So when I go to the field, I want to make sure that I have a good chance in developing this whole combination of stands, not relying on those evening stands, is a way that I found throughout the decades to maximize not only my success and the amount of opportunity that I have each hunting season for success, but my precious days off and vacation days of field and time away from the family when I actually want to go park my rear end into a stand and enjoy the great outdoors. Hey folks, I really appreciate you watching, and I want to invite you to check out our main website, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com. I'm going to miss all these, but we have seed to offer, hats, articles, web classes, books, consultations, and even a new podcast. I think we have 17 podcasts out there right now for you to listen to. So we have a lot to offer. Most of all, if you don't want to buy anything, I'm going to keep offering free videos, free articles. We have over 600 articles on the site. And most of all, thank you very much for watching, reading, listening, being a part of White Habitat Solutions. If you want to check this stuff out, awesome. Links are in the description.